Okay, let's see. We've got this section. We've got our servo section. So the last piece we need is our base plate. Now, if you're just building an arm kit without the base, without the box base, you won't need to do anything to this other than put it on. If we're building a display arm, what we need to do is these 4 holes here attach the servo horn that attaches to the servo in the base of the box. Now, if you're just building an arm kit, I've gone ahead and put a few holes. I think it's these. There's like 5 hole pattern on here. These outer 2 we use that I've given you to attach if you want to. So if you want to make something that bolts onto the bottom of this thing, you can use those 5 holes right there to give yourself an attachment point. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is, if we're building a arm with a base, with a display arm, you need to get out. You'll have this large servo. It's your 1/4 scale servo that's going to mount in the box. Now what we need out of this servo is the servo horn and the screw. So we'll open it up, and what they do is you have a bag that houses the servo there. And then you have a bag that houses all the screws and the hardware. So we'll rip that open. And what we're looking for, there's quite a few horns in here, big horns, but we don't need those. Basically all we need, get everything out. So I'll put that aside. What we're looking for is this small round horn, and again, this wood type screw that holds the horn on. So those are the 2 pieces we need. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mount this servo disc to the back of this round plate right here, and I tend to look at it and find what we've been calling the clean side, so the side with the smallest or cleanest holes. I tend to put that up and mount the servo horn on the back side because the holes are a little bit tapered and it helps the screws start, and it just helps everything start with that horn. So that's how we're going to do it. Now, this horn is going to need to be opened up. So the screws that we're going to use to mount this horn to this plate are going to be some leftover screws. So what I want you to do is go back to your leftover parts and find these servo horns and mounts for the servos that we used for the fingers. Now inside there you're going to find these tiny little flanged wood type screws. They're really small, and you should have basically 2 from every servo. Go ahead and pull out a bunch of those. I pull out 4, 5, or 6 of them because unfortunately they're not the greatest screws and they give us problems. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to pick 4 of the holes on this horn to open up, and basically they're at 90-degree increments. So any of the outside holes, there's going to be 8 outside ring holes. Pick 4 of those holes, evenly spaced, and we need to open them up. Now we want to open them up entirely so that screw will fit through without any kind of binding, because if you try to drive this screw through the horn, you'll end up stripping the head of the screw because they're just not that strong. So it's better to drill the plastic all the way out and just have the screw go into the wood. So 2 ways. We can go back to our X-Acto knife and go in from both sides and spin it until we get the hole to the right diameter, or we can go back to our handy dandy drill, which is what I'm going to do, and we'll just open those up. So pick 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Get all that off there. Okay, so you can see I've opened up 4 large holes, and when we put this on here, those 4 new larger holes will correspond to the 4 holes in the base. So once you do that, you want to go ahead and take a screw and put it in there, and then you're going to just screw these screws into the wood. Now, be very careful. Make sure you get the screwdriver that fits that screw the best you can. These strip super easy and they're a pain. So if you start to put one in, and it starts stripping or skipping on you, stop. Take it out. If you can't get it out with the screwdriver, grab it with a pair of pliers and screw it out of there and get a new screw. You have enough screws that you have extras, but don't just try to drive it in there because then it'll get stuck in there and be stripped, and then you'll have a problem later. So we're just going to gently put these in. Make sure you push really hard to hold the head of this in the screw so we don't have a problem. if you've cleared the plastic enough, they should go in fairly easy. And don't over tighten them too, because you'll strip those heads out. They get a nice bite in the wood. Okay, there we go. Didn't even strip one out. All right, so as you can see, 4 flange screws from the servos mounting our servo horn to the plate. All right. Now we'll get rid of these other screws. Okay, now the last thing we have to do is we have this horn screw. And this horn screw is the horn screw that's going to hold this servo horn to this servo once the arm is assembled and on the base. And it can be a bear to get down in there, because once everything's on the arm, you got to fish it down there with a screwdriver. So sometimes what I like to do is I'll actually drop it in the hole, if I can get it in there, and then I'll put a piece of tape, a small piece of tape over the hole. Just regular Scotch tape, really light stuff that you could easily break when you stick a screwdriver down in there later to try to get to it. And what that'll do is that'll keep that screw in there so you don't have to fight trying to get it in there later once the arm's together. So let's see, let me get some tape. Oh, I don't have any tape, I'm gonna have to find some. Okay, so we have some tape here. So like I was saying, we're just going to take a small square of something like Scotch tape. We're just going to place it right over top of that hole. And what that's going to do is that's going to keep that screw in there in place until we're ready to poke a screwdriver through and screw that horn on. Okay. Set that aside. Alright, so with that done, the next part we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to attach all these units back to the arm. So to do that, we're going to need some of our more of our square nuts. Just pour a little pile out right there. Okay, so let's start with the servo bunch here. So again, like I said, wires get tucked around the sides of the servos, come down, and we want to feed them through these little grooves at the bottom so that when we tighten down this part, they don't get pinched between the disc and the servo bracket. So I'm going to go ahead and load some nuts. Now you'll notice the corners of these servos are actually going to stop these nuts from going all the way in. But the nice thing about that is they actually will also stop the nuts from completely falling out. So what I like to do is just kind of hold it with the nuts heading in the direction and letting the servos stop it from sliding out. And then we'll put the cross one in, unless you have big fingers. Use a pair of pliers here. Come on. See, even I have trouble after a million times. Okay, so we're going to put that one in there. Make sure our wires, I'm just holding them down with this hand, make sure they're safe in that groove, and then we'll bring this up. Now obviously when you put this together, we need the tape up, the horn down, and you'll see these 3 slots here correspond to these 3 points. So we're just going to slide those right in there, like so. And then we'll get our washers. And 2 more. Now those 2 screws will sit a little bit more towards the back because of the way the nuts won't go all the way in, but they're okay in that position. I tend to bias the washer towards the front and then snug them down. Okay. All right, so that locks in our arm servos. Now what we need to do is go ahead and feed the arm down through those slots. Again, this one's a little tougher because you got 5 nuts that you have to take care of on this one. So I'm going to stick them all in. Some of them will probably fall out and I'll have to fish them in later, but we'll start with them all there and see how it goes. Okay, now what I'll also do is these wires coming from our servo, those can go right through this center slot here because they need to get back to the back side of the arm to connect up with all the others. So I'll tuck those through there, all one-handed here, get them back there, and then we'll set this piece in place. And there she goes. And this one takes 5 bolts. Probably a little over-engineered. Probably doesn't need this many, but they're there. Okay, one thing to note, these back 2 square nuts do not actually have tabs like all our others. These just have 2 holes going through to the square nut on the bottom side, and that was because there's just not enough room to do a tab. So those ones get a button head, but they do not get a washer, just the bolt. Because one, we don't want the washer covering up part of what we need to these axis holes, and the other thing is we want those heads to stay. Wow, that's not working. That is a bad. We got a bad hex square nut right there, I think. Let's see. Let's try it on this side. There we go. Let's see. Maybe if we loosen everybody up a little bit first. You should always get everything started before you tighten it. Not listening to my own directions. Yeah, that's just not going to work. Alright, I'm going to have to switch out this square nut. So I have a square nut here that the threads are bad in, so we'll set that aside and get a new one. If for some reason you run into something like that and you don't have enough parts, obviously let me know and I'll get you replacements. There we go, much better. Okay, so we're going to tighten those 5 down. And that is on. Beautiful. Okay.